All right, so today we're going deep, diving into something that's, pretty heavy, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely a tough topic.
We're going to be looking at the lasting impact of emotional and mental harm, those kind of scars that linger long after, any physical wounds might have healed.
Right. The invisible wounds.
Exactly. And to guide us, we've got this deeply personal account, someone really grappling with the aftermath of severe trauma.
It's powerful stuff.
It is. And I think it's crucial that we try to understand these invisible wounds, figure out why it's so important to acknowledge just how severe they can be.
I agree.
Okay, so to really get a feel for this, let me read a section from our source. It says, and I'm quoting here, "Not only do they throw me off a cliff mentally and emotionally,
Wow.
but they also leave me to die as if it never happened at all."
That's a powerful image.
It is, and it goes on. "And that's not even the worst part. I suffer from severe mental and emotional injuries, yet they do nothing to help me heal, as if it's all insignificant and I must live with it until I die."
Oh.
Yeah. Helping me heal doesn't matter to them at all.
That feeling of being completely abandoned, just discarded like you never mattered, that's something I hear so often from people who've been through similar trauma.
It's heartbreaking.
And the source, it goes on to describe what sounds a lot like complex PTSD, given the betrayal and the fact that the harm seems ongoing.
Complex PTSD. Now, for our listeners who might not be familiar with that,
Sure.
that can mean struggling with really intense anxiety that makes even basic things like talking to someone feel impossible, or being haunted by flashbacks that completely disrupt your day-to-day life.
Exactly. And the source makes this really striking comparison. They say that, quote, "Sometimes these injuries are worse than physical ones."
Yeah. Why do you think that might be?
Well, when you think about it, it's kind of like these wounds, these invisible wounds, they can just fester if they're not acknowledged, if they're not dealt with.
Right.
It's like a hidden infection that spreads and it starts impacting every part of your life.
Yeah, your relationships, your work, your ability to trust, to connect with other people.
Absolutely.
And it really makes you wonder, is this lack of support, is it always unintentional?
That's a good question. And the source does suggest that this disregard for their pain, it might be a deliberate tactic, a form of manipulation.
Mm-hmm. Now, isn't there a risk of, seeing manipulation everywhere, even if it's not actually there?
You're absolutely right. We have to be careful not to jump to conclusions. It's a serious issue that needs to be approached thoughtfully. But consider this. Think about the long-term consequence. If someone is constantly told that their feelings are invalid, their whole perception of reality can become warped.
Oh.
It can really erode their self-worth and make it incredibly difficult for them to set boundaries.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So why do you think there's this focus on what we can see? Where does that come from?
Well, we live in a world, a culture, that often prioritizes what can be measured, what can be quantified. It's a lot easier to understand a broken bone than the intricacies of the human mind. But that doesn't make emotional pain any less real, any less damaging.
It's so true. So what can we do? How do we change this? How do we start acknowledging those invisible wounds?
A good first step, I think, is education. Educating ourselves on the signs of emotional abuse, manipulation. There are a lot of resources available online in your community. Another crucial step is simply listening with empathy, validating the experiences of those who've been hurt.
That's so important. Creating a space where people feel safe to share their experiences without being judged.
Absolutely. And as you move forward from this conversation, I want you to think about this. What can you do in your own life, in your relationships, to help create that space of support, of understanding? Maybe it's the small act of kindness, lending an ear, or believing someone when they confide in you about their pain. Even seemingly insignificant actions can truly make a world of difference.
Yeah, that's a powerful thought. Food for thought for all of us.
Definitely.
And on that note, we'll wrap up for today.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us.